You're watching Capitol Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
Welcome back. State Senator Steve McClure joins us now, a former prosecutor and a Republican from Springfield. Good to have you with us to respond to Senate Democrat Scott Bennett there just a minute ago. Was it a political victory for Republicans to deny one of Governor Pritzker's appointees to the Prisoner Review Board?
It was a moral victory because the people that they have been letting out are outrageous. And I think a lot of folks across this state, when they hear about not just the original crimes that were committed, but the fact that many of these folks are showing that they have not been rehabilitated, it's really crazy. So it's a moral victory for the people of this state.
Senator Bennett also pointed out that Illinois did away with parole a number of years ago. So by default, the only prisoners left in jail today that would qualify for this, just by default, have a longer prison sentence. And it stands to reason that they have a longer prison sentence because the thing they did all those decades ago was really heinous. How do you factor that reality into this current political climate?
Well, number one, it's a political climate right now. And that's troubling because these decisions at their best times are made by the trier of fact, by the judge after seeing the evidence.
Do you believe there should be no parole?
There should be parole. I mean, well, everyone has an MSR if they're sentenced to the Department of Corrections, a mandatory supervised release. Mm-hmm. So that period, some states call it parole, some states call it MSR. We call it MSR.
And Illinois did away with parole a number of years ago. There are some who want to bring it back.
But it's called MSR.
It's a different procedure, right?
But it's the same thing. You're sort of looking after a person. If they violate their conditions of release, then they have to go back in prison, that sort of thing.
Under which terms do we allow this person to be restored their freedom, basically?
Right. Well, look, there are instances where sometimes sentences are too harsh. There are also instances where sometimes sentences are too light. In instances where it's too harsh, then yes, there should be another look taken. But for the most part, these sentences that are the longest sentences, that are the most severe, are justified. And in some of these instances, people were originally sentenced to the death penalty. And so to take that lightly and to just say, oh, well, you've served your time, is very troubling, particularly when the evidence doesn't change. The explanations may change so that people can get lesser sentences, but the evidence itself doesn't change. And the judge at the time that they made the sentence saw the evidence.
Governor Pritzker spoke to the credentials of his appointee, their experience, the work they've done to arrive at this place. He's not just random willy-nilly picking people out of a lineup to do this job. He's picking people that he feels have a certain perspective.
Well, apparently the perspective he's concerned about is how many violent folks that they're willing to release early, because that seems to be the only perspective that some of these people have, which is very troubling.
Mm-hmm. Let's look back. So we're looking now at the end of a prison sentence, once most of it has been fulfilled. Let's go back to the beginning, before that conviction and sentence comes down, is right before the trial, this pre-trial phase. Starting in January, courts will have it's right now it's a little hazy, but they will have a choice to take a suspect accused of a violent crime and put them behind bars with no bail at all. First of all, for violent offenders, people accused of murder, people accused of rape, people accused of some of the worst crimes on the books, isn't that a security upgrade for the public that they no longer have the option to pay their way to freedom, to pay their way out and intimidate a witness, to pay their way out and go and wreak havoc on other people before their trial?
Well, in crimes such as murder, you can set the bail so high that they'll never bond out.
How do you know that? How do you know they don't have a whole bunch of money sitting around?
You have a good idea when these people get into court, roughly where
and sometimes there's no bail allowed. But
and sometimes that's exactly right. They take away.
But don't you want a guarantee? Isn't a guarantee better than a maybe?
A guarantee is better than a maybe. However, this opens the door for people that commit robbery, burglary, arson. They can't be detained at all. So you're opening the door for all these folks to be released.
How do you know that?
Because in the bill, it says that if it is a sentence that is eligible for probation, then you cannot, on these forcible felonies, which is what I just described, if they're eligible for probation, you cannot hold them in pretrial detention. So
even
for
even if a judge evaluates the situation and says this person seems dangerous, that judge is barred from holding.
Can't do it. I think
there's disagreement in this building on that.
There may be, but they don't know the law apparently, because I know it better than they do.
Yeah.
Now, here's the deal.
And there's also, so let me ask you this. I want you to put a finer point on that in a minute. But
Sure.
if there is disagreement, or if there's some hazy clarity on that, or if the courts themselves are not quite sure how to adjudicate this, will you be one of the Senate Republicans at the table hoping to change this law while you have a chance before the election?
Absolutely, and I tried to be at the
Before
table.
the election?
Yes, I tried to be at the table for the previous trailer bill. And we made the offer, I will be there to negotiate. That was declined.
You ended up not voting for it. Why not?
One of the reasons why is because we were not involved in the process. And it didn't fix the fundamental issues with the bill. That's the main thing.
Let's get back to that. You were making a point a minute ago, and I stepped on your toes.
Sure, so forcible felonies, if they're eligible for probation, you can't detain a person. The only exception would be in a situation where you prove that a person is a flight risk. And in this legislation, you basically have to show that they've got plane tickets to Bermuda or whatever. But if you've got no criminal history and you commit a robbery or a burglary, you are not eligible to be detained in pretrial detention. And that's
because if at the end of your conviction, when the court says you're guilty, and they don't lock you up even then, why should they now, before you've been proven guilty?
Number one, in a felony case, you have to show by probable cause that a person did it in order to bring your charges forward. Sometimes a grand jury indicts a person, sometimes a judge makes that finding at court. So I think a lot of people just think that you charge a person and then they're just pending trial at some point and then everything gets settled. But they don't realize that you have to have a probable cause hearing where a judge has to say, yes, there is enough evidence to charge this person with this offense. So it's not as if a person is charged and then they're thrown in jail. They're charged and then a judge has to accept those charges by showing that there is probable cause, or else the charges get thrown out. So there is that back and forth before the trial ever takes place.
How will this change in the law? And this will be a big change in the administration of justice. This ending of cash bail. This will just on the ground level in the county courts, there will be a lot of different and new things taking place. How will it affect the trial process itself for those cases that actually go to trial? What changes do you see on that horizon?
Well, because of certain changes, there are going to be a lot more judges that are going to have their hands tied, quite frankly, because this is causing a lot more work for the state's attorney's offices across the state. Sangamon County is going to have to hire a lot more assistant state's attorneys. This is almost like a bill to allow for more lawyers to get employment. But it doesn't really do justice to the victims.
Bear that out. Why is that?
Because some of the deadlines for going before the court and showing that you want to detain a person, et cetera, are going to cause us to have a lot of more resources expended and witnesses brought in before trial.
We were just having this conversation off camera with Senator Bennett before he left the set here a minute ago. There is a constitutional right to a speedy trial.
Absolutely.
And if you talk to any victims of our justice system, victims of crimes out on the street, one of the most frustrating, helpless, and hopeless feelings anybody can encounter after violence, which is already bad enough as it is the frustrating gauntlet you have to climb to try and hope that you reach justice at some point. It's not a speedy process right now in this country.
No, and bogging us down with more work in each one of these cases, needlessly in some instances, is not going to help the system move quicker.
So, to that effect, there's a lot of talk about funding, defunding police, hiring more law enforcement officers. Is there a case to be made that we have an obligation to justice to hire more state's attorneys, assistant state's attorneys, courts, judges, staff? If we have more people doing that work, are they going to be able to do it better or faster? I don't know the answer to that.
Well, that's the question, because if you hire more people, right now there is a shortage of state's attorneys across the state. Right now. There's a shortage of police officers as well, including here in Sangamon County, by the way. Now, here's the issue. When you're hiring more people...
It's because some of you left to run for office.
I'd be happy to serve as a prosecutor right now, except for our Attorney General decided that it's a conflict of interest to serve as a senator.
I was just poking fun.
That's okay. No, but the important thing is when you are trying to get more folks in, you may not be getting the best people to come in because you're desperate for filling positions. So it works both ways.
Okay, so sum total, you say you will be at the table to try and negotiate changes in the Safety Act. Which of those...
If I'm allowed to be at the table, which I have not been allowed to be at the table yet.
I will make you this challenge, if I may.
Sure.
Effective legislators figure that out. There's a way to get there. I think. Maybe I'm wrong.
Mark, I'm in the super minority.
You are.
It was a miracle that I got my DCFS MACE bill passed in the Senate, let alone trying to get involved in these talks.
There are some of your colleagues, Republicans, who frankly don't want to change the Safety Act. They want it to fail They want the existing parts of the law that have confusing language to be tried out, implemented come January, February, and they want to use that as a political issue to win seats in office now. They don't want to touch it. What would you tell them?
From my Senate colleagues, I can't speak for anybody else, but we want this to change because public safety is dependent upon it. The catch and release policies that are in Cook County right now are doing horrible damage to real people and real victims. We don't want to see people get injured or hurt or murdered or not feel safe in their own homes. To spread those policies statewide is something that all of us are going to fight regardless of the political consequences, because we don't want people to die. We don't want people to get hurt.
You said regardless of the political consequences.
That's exactly
I want
right.
to come back to that point you're making, because there are some people who think in this building, hey, if we get tough on crime, if we deliver that, I'm going to use a craven political word here, that win to Democrats that allows them to go home and say, we're tough on crime, see? It might cost Republicans at the ballot box come November. But you're saying that doesn't matter to you.
No, I'm not concerned about the ballot box. I'm concerned about the victims in this state who are being terrorized right now by violent crime.
Fascinating. So if you're in a closed-door conversation, you're in the Senate Republican caucus, and you're hearing these political discussions in private, and there are some people who say to you in that room, I think we should let the Democrats own this. What do you say to them?
I've never heard any Senate Republican say that. But if someone did say that, it's the same like with the Prisoner Review Board. That's one great example of this. We could have just sat on our hands and let these people continue to release violent child rapists, child murderers who are not rehabilitated, or we could have made a big issue of this and get things changed before the election. We made the issue because it was the right thing to do. We will do the same thing on crime. We are willing to work with our friends on the other side of the aisle, but they have to be willing to listen to us, which they have not been willing to listen to us yet.
How do you describe the political disagreement or the perspective difference between Illinois Senate Democrats and between Governor Pritzker? Because after the Senate Democrats abstained from confirming his appointee to the Prisoner Review Board, Governor Pritzker doubled down and said they got it wrong. They're falling for Facebook fakery promulgated by these Senate Republicans, and there's this apparent gap between Governor Pritzker and Senate Democrats. How do you see that?
Mark, for the first time ever, we were able to talk to one of the members of the Prisoner Review Board in committee. This was in an appropriations committee that I sat in. I asked the chair of the Prisoner Review Board, is there a convicted double murderer on the board sitting unconfirmed by the state Senate who has been voting to release people that they served in the Department of Corrections with? They could not answer the question. I then said, are they voting either way, either one way or the other, yes or no to these people? They couldn't answer the question. The next day, the governor, by his own choice, decided to withdraw that nomination.
You think because you're a line of questioning?
Without question, because why else is this
And you
person...
knew the answers to those questions?
I did. Not only did he vote to release someone he served with, he basically vouched for them at the beginning of the hearing. Talk about a conflict of interest.
Mm-hmm. We'll leave it there for now. There's a lot more to discuss on this pursuit to justice in this building, which is a complicated and thorny issue every time we try to change those laws, because it has a ripple effect and it changes the way cases are handled.
Sure.
I want to revisit that.
Sure.
There's another issue that I think could be an issue of justice, or at least consumer practice in this region, in central Illinois. But it's not isolated to central Illinois. This is an issue that could pop up at any time in any corner of the state about how many doctors are available to see sick patients that live there. Insurance companies hold a lot of levers. They can say this, they can invite doctors into a network and say, okay, you can start practicing on these patients, or they can shut that off. That's called an adequate network. If you don't have enough doctors to see enough patients, then all of a sudden you have eroded the adequacy of that network. A new measure filed in the House, it has a Senate bill sponsor, Senator Doris Turner, would fine insurance companies if they don't have an adequate network. Would a bill like that have bipartisan support, do you think?
Yes, I believe it would.
Why?
Because everybody is concerned with medical treatment these days, and particularly Blue Cross Blue Shield. The issue that's been happening to all of us, it's happening to us too. I had to switch my insurance provider. So it's an issue that really hits home, and none of us want to see sick people who need treatment to not get their treatment, or have these incredible insurance bills that they can't afford, despite the fact that they're supposed to have great quality health insurance.
Blue Cross Blue Shield says, well, we're not for profit. It's the for-profit Springfield Clinic that's trying to squeeze us for all we're worth. What do you make of just, you mentioned earlier a moral issue. How does it strike your sense of morality that people on death's door, people fighting to stay alive, the patients, are the ones who are stuck looking at these big bills, fearing, will I go bankrupt in my pursuit to try and just keep breathing?
Yeah, no, it's terrible, and I saw that firsthand. I mean, luckily my family was able to help my mom when she was sick, but my mom died of lung cancer, and we saw the bills that came up every day, and you're just struggling with the fact that she's dying. It's an impossible situation, and all of us in this building feel for these folks, and we have to do what we can to make things right.
Well, I mean, it's a for-profit healthcare system that we have in this country.
I know. And the bills that people get charged for Kleenexes and emergency rooms and all kinds of stuff are outrageous. And that really needs to be dealt with at the federal level.
At the federal level.
Absolutely.
Governor Pritzker, running for office in 2017 and 18, ran on a campaign pledge to set up what you might consider a trial balloon of a public option. States like Vermont have tried it, didn't go very well. Illinois could become the biggest state to do that. That might be something that the federal government could take and study and say, okay, like they did in Massachusetts before Obamacare, take a federal program big that way. If it happened at the state level, you sort of, this is where you experiment with these things. I'm going to give them a second to replace that battery. And I'm going to buy you a little more time to think of your really smart answer to this question. Okay, we're back on, so in 3, 2, 1. Governor Pritzker ran on this promise of bringing a public option to Illinois that could be a trial balloon nationwide. If it worked well here, maybe other states or the federal government could copy it. Would you support a plan like that?
No, the problem right now is that in lots of these public option programs, the quality of health care goes down. It diminishes. And in fact, we are leading the world right now on innovation and medical advancements. And guess what?
And you believe that's because of capitalism?
I do believe that is because of capitalism. Now, there needs to be restrictions. We need to get these costs under control, but it is the American way to innovate and to do things in which you can prosper and your business can prosper. The incentives to prosper are taken away with the public option.
I want to explore that thought a little bit further because the innovation often happens in a lab. It doesn't usually happen, unless I'm just unaware. I'm not aware of many cases where it happens in the operating room. The service and the outcome is, there's not a lot of innovation that can happen in there. Maybe you move your scalpel in this way or you use the diagnostic machine a different way. Where's the innovation there? How is capitalism adding to the healing of this patient?
It's in the private sector, in these industries, in these businesses that explore in laboratories away from the emergency room, innovations in medicine and vaccines and everything else. So the incentive for them to do this work, quite frankly, is the fact that they're going to make money off of doing it.
You mentioned controlling costs, though. There's a bill that would cap the cost of insulin nationwide.
Well, as you know, I voted to cap the cost right here in Illinois.
For state workers, or for state, I believe it was for state plans, right? For state-sponsored health insurance plans.
I mean, these people should not be out of their pocket these incredible amounts of money just to get a medication that they need.
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting issue. Blue Cross Blue Shield says, hey, we've been at the table. Governor Pritzker says, no, you haven't. Get to the table. Springfield Clinic is saying, our doctors are worth their value, and they're doing good work in this area. They're making their value proposition. What's the outcome that you want to see happen here?
I want to see us continue to have fantastic doctors, but also for people to have great health care. And I think that Blue Cross needs to come back to the table here with Springfield Clinic, and they need to work out a deal. It's been very unfortunate, and it's been detrimental to citizens across this area, and it's troubling. So I would like for people to, on both sides of the aisle, to make some concessions and to work together, because we need good health care in this region, and we need good doctors in this region, and these two entities have to work together for that to happen.
Do you plan to sign on to this bill?
I need to look at the details of the bill, but it would certainly be something I could support.
Very interesting. State Senator Steve McClure, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Mark.
Coming up next, a closer description of that bill is House Democrat Sue Shearer in Decatur. She'll take a look at some of these issues plaguing patients in their pursuit to see doctors on their dead-end directory online. Those details coming up next.